Hello everybody and welcome to the ultimate Wii Softmodding guide for beginners. This getting started guide contains a series of tutorials that will introduce you to the world of Wii Homebrewing. While there are a lot of things you can do with a homebrewed Wii, I'll be covering 6 subjects in this video that are some of the more common things. I'll be showing you how to install the Homebrew channel using the str2 hacks exploit, protect against possible console bricks using BootMii and Priiloader, download homebrew applications right from your console using the Open Shop channel, backup to and play Wii games from a USB drive with USBLoaderGX, play certain Wii games online with others using Wiimmfi, and how to re-enable access to the Forecast, News, Check Me Out, Everybody Votes, and Nintendo channels again with Reconnect24. This video assumes that you have a standard Nintendo Wii, which is what I'll be using over the course of this video. If you have a Wii Mini, you can still homebrew it, but you'll have to follow a different guide that I'll have linked up in the cards. You also won't be able to use any of the online related services since the Wii Mini does not come with a network adapter. In addition to the Wii console, you're going to need an SD card and a USB drive. Now the Homebrew channel can read apps off of either an SD card or a USB drive, so you could use a single USB drive to store both Homebrew applications and game backups. However, an SD card is recommended since it is required to create a system backup using BootMii. Throughout this video guide, I'll be using both. The SD card will be used to store Homebrew applications as well as the system backup created with BootMii, and the USB drive will store the backed up games. If you only want to use the SD card to store the system backup, you can do that as well and store everything else on the USB drive, but this is how I'll have it configured for this video. You're also going to need access to a Windows-based computer or virtual machine and the internet, both on your PC and Wii console. Aside from all the standard accessories that you would use with your Nintendo Wii, that's all you gotta have, so let's get started. Gathering necessary files. To make things easier for use later on, we're going to download all of the necessary files first and get them copied over to our SD card or USB drive. I'll have links in the description to 6 files, 5 archives, and a batch file. Download all of these. The first portion of this tutorial can be done on a Windows, macOS, or Linux machine, but a Windows-based system or VM will be required once we get to the Reconnect24 section of this guide, which is what the batch file is for. But we're going to leave it alone for now. Next, plug in your SD card and USB drive to your computer. They both need to be formatted to the FAT32 file system. So if you have any data on them, it's recommended to copy it over to your computer first. If you're using Windows, the standard format tool will only allow you to use up to 32 gigabytes of space on the drive with this file system. This is fine if you're using a drive that is 32 gigabytes or less in size, but if you're using a device larger than 32 gigabytes, which you might be doing to store more games with USBLoaderGX, you'll have to download the FAT32 format tool, which I'll also have linked down below. Since I'm using an SD card and a USB drive, I'm going to format both of them to the FAT32 file system. But right now we're only focused on the device that you're going to use to store Homebrew applications, which in my case is the SD card. Open up the Priiloader archive and extract all of the files to the root of the SD card. Next, go into the new apps folder on the SD card. Then open up the homebrew_browser zip file and extract the homebrew_browser folder to the apps folder on the SD card. And do the same thing for the D2X cIOS installer, Nintendont, and USBLoaderGX archives. When finished, this is how the file structure of your drive should look. Installing the Homebrew channel and BootMii. Okay, so now that we have the necessary files, we can move over to the Wii console. But we will have to return to the computer later on in this video. Insert your SD card to the Wii's SD card slot on the front, located underneath the small door, and the USB drive into the bottom, or right if you have it standing up, USB port located on the back. Open up the Wii options menu and click on Wii settings. Note the version number at the top right. You want to make sure that it's version 4.3. The letter at the end corresponds to which region your console was manufactured to work in, so it will be either a U, E, J, or a K. But if it does not say 4.3 before this letter, go to the last page and perform a system update. Then go to the second page of the Wii system settings and click on Internet. Click on Connection Settings and choose the connection that you're currently using. Select Change Settings and press the plus key on your Wii Remote a couple of times to go over to the Auto Obtain DNS screen. Make note of the yellow text at the top. The Auto Obtain IP address and the Auto Obtain DNS screens look very similar, so make sure you're on the correct screen. Click on No and then Advanced Settings. Change the primary DNS to 97.74.103.14 and the secondary DNS to 173.201.71.14. Then press Confirm and save. The console will then perform a connection test, so let it do that. When it finishes, select No when it prompts you to perform a Wii system update. Then click the back button twice until you're back at the main internet settings screen, and then click on User Agreements and Yes. Once this screen shows up, click on Next. At this point, the system will reach out to the internet to download the latest end-user license agreement. But because we modify the DNS settings, the system will load a different web page that contains the exploit. If you see this screen, you've done everything correctly. Make sure to do as it says and wait for 1 to 2 minutes. Don't click on the I accept or I don't accept buttons, as this will take you back to the Wii menu and the exploit won't work. If you did this by accident, you'll have to go through this process again. Now, I've had a good success rate with this exploit, but if your console locks up and if you are not able to move the cursor around with the Wii Remote, you'll have to force power off your system and try the exploit again. It could take a couple of tries for it to work properly. Then, if the exploit worked, you should see lines of text on a black background. The system will then download the HackMe installer over the network and begin to load it. It can take a couple of seconds, but if you see this static screen, it may look like something's wrong at first, but this is a great sign because the next screen will be the disclaimer for the HackMe installer. It will take a little bit to show up, but once the option to press 1 appears, do so, and you'll load into the HackMe installer. This is where we can install both the Homebrew Channel and BootMii. Before pressing Continue, take note of the results on this first screen. The Homebrew Channel will say can be installed, but BootMii will either say can be installed or in my case, can only be installed as an iOS. I'll quickly explain the difference here. Installing BootMii as boot2 will allow it to run even before the system menu is loaded. This means that if you accidentally brick your console, you can load BootMii to restore it from a backup. Installing BootMii as an iOS means that it will need to be launched from the Homebrew Channel. But installing Priiloader, which we will do in the next step, will still provide a recovery method for us. If you have the ability to, it's recommended to install BootMii as both boot2 and as an iOS. But this is only doable if you have an older hardware revision. In my case, I have a newer hardware revision, so I only have the option to install BootMii as an iOS. Click on Continue and then use the up button on your D-pad to select Install the Homebrew Channel. Then click Yes, Continue, and the channel will be installed. Once it says Success, click on Continue. You'll be brought back to the main menu. Now go down to the BootMii option. Like I said, if it gives you the option to install BootMii as both boot2 and as an iOS, install both. Since I only have the option to install BootMii as an iOS, I'll do that. Then click Exit, and you'll be taken to the Homebrew Channel. Making a NAND backup with BootMii. Next, we'll move on to creating a backup of our Wii's NAND storage. In the event of a console brick, this can be used to restore the Wii to a working state. While I have never personally experienced a console brick, it is possible, and this is a good safeguard to have in place. On the Homebrew Channel, press the Home button on your Wii Remote and select Launch BootMii. At this point, you'll have to use the Power and Reset buttons on the console itself to navigate this menu. Press the power button 3 times to go over to the last icon and then press the reset button. Then, with your SD card inserted, press the reset button on the SD card with the green arrow. BootMii will now begin to create a NAND backup on your SD card. You'll want to leave the console alone until it finishes, and don't worry if you see any bad blocks, as this is normal. It will then verify the backup it created, and once this finishes, you can press any button to go back to the BootMii menu. Choosing the button with the SD card and a red arrow is how you restore from the NAND backup that you just created. Press the power button 3 times to navigate to the arrow on the right, and then press the reset button. Then press the power button once to navigate to the Homebrew Channel option and press the reset button to return to it. Installing Priiloader. This gives you another layer of brick protection on your console that can load before the system menu. It's especially useful if you didn't have the ability to install BootMii as boot to. But even if you did, installing Priiloader won't hurt anything, and it will even give you some additional capabilities. If you stored the Homebrew applications on the SD card, they should show up automatically in the Homebrew channel. If you stored them on the USB drive, press 1 on your Wii Remote and change the source from SD to USB. Then launch Priiloader. On the screen that appears, press the plus button on your Wii Remote to install Priiloader. Once it finishes installing, press A to exit. You can then turn off your console. Launch Priiloader by powering on your console and immediately holding down the reset button. In the event of a console brick, this menu will allow you to launch into BootMii iOS to restore the backup that you made on your SD card. You can also bypass the system menu and launch straight into the Homebrew channel or even the game disk if you have one inserted. But there are also some useful options under System Menu Hacks. Unlike in BootMii, you can use the Wii Remote to navigate through this menu. In here you can do things like disable region locking and enable the ability to move the disk channel around on the system menu. Pretty useful stuff. Now, you don't have to change any of these settings if you don't want to, and if you don't know what some of these options mean, I'd recommend reading up on them so you'll know exactly what they do before changing them. I'll have a link down below to a detailed list that describes each of these options. You can get back to the main screen by pressing Save Settings at the bottom. For now, let's launch back into the Homebrew channel. But you can rest easy now, knowing that if you accidentally screw your console up, you'll have a way to restore it back to a working state. Installing the Homebrew browser. Now, if you recall from the beginning of this video, we had to download some Homebrew applications and copy them to our SD card or USB drive. But what I'm going to show you now will let you bypass this step for certain apps and download them right from your console. This is made possible through the Open Shop channel, which is a revival project for the Homebrew browser. Launch it by clicking on the Homebrew browser app in the Homebrew channel. It will load up and take you to a menu that looks like this. If you ever used the old Homebrew browser, this will look very familiar to you since it has the exact same interface. What you can do here is browse through a wide variety of Homebrew applications and download them right to your console. This just provides a level of convenience because it removes the need for a computer for some applications. No, unfortunately you won't be able to do this with every Homebrew application, but it's a good idea to check and see if the app is in the Homebrew browser first before going to your computer to download it. You can even update existing Homebrew apps using this tool if a new version has been released. Installing custom iOS. Next, I'm going to show you how to install a couple of custom iOS versions. This is required for USBLoaderGX, the tool that we'll use to back up Wii games, to work properly, so you'll need to do this first. From the Homebrew channel, launch the D2X cIOS installer. When it loads, press any button to continue as it says. Press the right D-pad button a few times to change the cIOS version to V10 Beta 52. Then press the down D-pad button and change the cIOS base to 56. Next, move down to the cIOS slot and change this to 249. And finally, change the cIOS revision to 65535. Press A and then A again to install. Once it installs, press A once more and you'll be back at the configuration screen. You've just installed one custom iOS version, but we have to install one more. So change the cIOS version again to V10 Beta 52. Then change the base, this time to 57, the slot to 250, and the version to 65535. Press A twice to install, and when it finishes installing, press B to exit back to the Homebrew channel. Using USBLoaderGX and Nintendont. Now that you have the custom iOS versions installed, you can launch USBLoaderGX from the Homebrew channel. Make sure the USB drive you configured at the beginning of this video is plugged into the bottom, or right if you have the console standing up, USB port. USBLoaderGX is extremely simple to use. The interface is designed in the Wii menu style, and it even has the menu music playing in the background. To copy a game to the USB drive, insert the disc to the console. You can also press the plus button on the left side if you already have the disc inserted. Then press install and yes. The app will then recognize the game and ask you to confirm installation, which is just copying it to the USB drive. So click OK. And then we'll begin to copy. When it finishes copying, it won't show up initially as you have to click on the Sources button at the top to enable Wii games. You can also disable NAND channels to not show any Wii channels in the list. While you're in this view mode, you can click the box cover on the left side to download cover art, which adds a nice touch. You can change the view mode by using the buttons at the top. To launch a game, just click on it. You'll then be brought to a very disk channel-like interface where you can launch the game. This is probably one of the more popular homebrew mods out there because it provides a valuable convenience factor. You can now store multiple Wii games on your USB drive and get access to all of them at any time. Traveling with your console has just become way easier as well. But Wii games are not the only thing that you can use with USBLoaderGX. If you have Nintendont on your console, you can configure USBLoaderGX to store and launch GameCube games. We already have the files that we need, but we have to make some modifications to the application settings. Click on the settings icon at the bottom left and then choose Loader Settings. Scroll down until you reach the GameCube settings category. Make sure the source is set to Auto and the mode to Nintendont. If you have a GameCube memory card with save data, you'll want to turn off the virtual memory card feature from this menu as well. If you don't have one, leave it enabled so you can still save your game data. Then go back to the settings menu, go over to the second page, and select Custom Paths. Scroll down until you find Nintendont Loader Path. You want to make sure that this path points to the location of Nintendont on your storage drive. In my case, it's going to be sd:/apps/Nintendont. You'll also need to make sure that the main GameCube path is using the correct device. If you plug your USB drive into the bottom port, the system will recognize it as USB 2. You can change both of these settings by clicking on the path itself and navigating to the correct location with the file browser. Once you do that, you can pop in a GameCube disc and back it up to your USB drive. There will be an additional prompt asking you where you would like to store the game, and you'll want to choose Main Path when you see this. To show GameCube games in the list, click on the Sources button and check GC Games. You can also download cover art and launch the games just like we did with the Wii titles. And that's it. As long as you have enough storage space on your USB drive, you can make backups of all of your games. You can also see the amount of free space left on your drive and the amount of games you have stored on it at the bottom of the screen. Playing games online with Wiimmfi. Next, I'll show you an incredibly easy way to play the Wii games you've copied over to your USB drive online. Nintendo shut down their Wi-Fi connection service for the Wii back in 2014, but there are a couple of third-party services out there that provide an alternative server that you can use to play with others. One of them is Wiimmfi, which can be used by going into USBLoaderGX's options menu and clicking on Loader Settings. From here, scroll down the list until you get to Private Server and click it until it changes to wiimmfi.de. And that's it. You can launch a supported game and play online just like you did prior to 2014. A quick side note though, this method only works with games that you've copied over with USBLoaderGX. You can't use this method to play games online by launching them from the disk channel. You can check out Wiimmfi's website, which I'll have linked down below, for a list of supported games. And you can also see live stats for the most active games. Mario Kart Wii is consistently the most popular game, but the service also supports Smash Bros. Brawl and Animal Crossing. Connecting to Reconnect24. Last but not least, let's take a look at Reconnect24. This is another replacement for a Wii online service, this time WeConnect24, hence the name. This service used to power the Forecast, News, Check Me Out, Everybody Votes, and Nintendo channels, as well as the Wii Mail service before Nintendo shut it down. Reconnect24 provides an alternative server that all of these channels can use. To get this installed though, we have to move to a Windows-based computer. The first thing you want to do is open up the Start menu and do a search for Windows Features. Then check .NET Framework 3.5, press OK, and select Let Windows Update download the files for you. Once it finishes, you'll have to restart your computer. If this is the same machine that you used at the beginning of this video, you can launch the batch file that you already downloaded. If not, download the Reconnect24 patcher from the link below. You'll need to remove whatever device you've been using to store homebrew applications from your Wii and plug it back into your computer. From the patcher, press 1 and then press 1 again to select the regular Wii console. Press 1 once more to select Install Reconnect 24, and then press 1 a final time to select the Express option. On the next screen, choose your console's region. Unfortunately, if you have a Korean or Japanese Wii, the Everybody Votes, Check Me Out, and Nintendo channel will not work. So if you're in that boat, it doesn't matter which option you select here. Since I have a US Wii, I'll choose option number 2. If you would like the patcher to automatically copy the files it patches to your storage device, press 1. If you want to copy the files manually later on, then press 2. The patcher will then say it has detected your SD card, but you want to make sure that it shows the correct drive letter. If it didn't, press 3 to change it. It's imperative that you get this correct. So if you don't know what drive letter your computer assigned to it, double check by opening this PC. Once you verify that it has selected the correct drive letter, press 1 to start the patching process. The patcher will then download the necessary files, patch them, and if you selected option 1, copy them to your SD card. Whatever directory you launch the patcher from is where it will store its temporary files. So if you see a bunch of folders appear, don't worry, as this is normal. Once it finishes, press 3 to close the patcher and clean up any temporary files. You'll now have a WAD and apps folder on the desktop. If you didn't have the patcher copy these files automatically for you, then you'll have to do that yourself now. Just drag the folders to the root of the SD card and select yes to any merge prompts that appear. And now we're done with the PC side of things. So you can safely remove your SD card or USB drive from the computer and plug it back into the Wii. When you launch the Homebrew channel, you should now see 2 new apps, Reconnect 24 Mail Patcher and Wiimod Lite. We're going to launch Wiimod Lite first. When it loads, navigate to the WAD manager and select the location of the files. Again, it will either be SD card or USB depending on what device you used. Then navigate down to the iOS 31 listing and press A twice. Once it installs, do the same thing for iOS 80 and then for the 3 channel WADs. Once those are all installed, you can exit back to the Homebrew channel and launch into the Reconnect 24 Mail Patcher. This is a very simple process. The patch will run automatically and does not take very long at all. Once you see the option to press Home, do so and you'll exit back to the Homebrew channel. But we're not done yet, as we have to go into the Wii Options menu, then go into Wii Settings, Internet, Connection Settings, whatever connection that you're using, change settings, and go over to the same auto-obtain DNS page. Change the primary DNS to 164.132.44.106. and the secondary DNS to 1.1.1.1. Then click Confirm and perform a connection test. Now you want to go back to the second page of the settings menu and select WiiConnect 24. Go into the first menu option and change it to On. Do the same with Standby Connection, and slot illumination is up to you. Then go back a couple of pages to get to the Internet Settings menu and select User Agreements. Select Yes and allow the EULA to load. The developers recommend reading through this EULA as it gives information about the service. Then click I accept. And that is how you get access to the Reconnect 24 service. You now have patched versions of the WiiConnect 24 channels and can send and receive emails from your console once again. And that brings this much longer tutorial video to an end. Congratulations, you now have a fully homebrewed Wii with some very useful applications installed. As I said, there are many more things you can do with the homebrewed Wii, but I hope this video helped you get started. If it did, be sure to give it a like and get subscribed, and as always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.